Never told my son how much I earned. Not because I was ashamed, but because I never needed money to define who I was. To Daniel, my son, I was just his mother, the woman who woke up before sunrise, packed lunch, left for work quietly, and returned tired in the evening. The woman who reused old handbags, bought clothes on sale, and never talked about achievements. He thought I worked a normal office job, maybe a clerk, maybe an assistant, someone ordinary. And I let him believe that, because I raised him to respect people, not salaries. But the night his wife's parents offered me $300 a month to stay away from my own son, I realized something painful. They never saw me as a person, only as a problem that needed to be managed. Let me tell you how that night unfolded. The call. Daniel called me on a Wednesday evening. His voice sounded tense. "Mom, Emma's parents are visiting from overseas. They want to have dinner together this weekend." I smiled. "That's nice. Where?" He hesitated. "A restaurant downtown. A fancy one." I paused. "Do they know anything about me?" Silence. Then he said, carefully, "I told them you live simply, that you don't have much." There it was. Not poor, not struggling, just not much. "I see," I said calmly. "What time?" 7, he replied quickly, relieved I didn't argue. After the call, I sat alone in my apartment. Same couch, same walls, same quiet life. And for the first time in years, something inside me shifted. I decided I would go, but I wouldn't correct their assumptions. If they thought I was poor, I would let them see what they believed poverty deserved. The decision. I didn't dress to impress. I chose an old navy blue dress with faded edges, no jewelry, flat shoes I used for grocery shopping. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself, not because I looked poor, but because I looked invisible, and that was exactly the point. The restaurant. The restaurant was the kind where the lights are warm and the voices are low, where menus don't have prices, where confidence is worn like perfume. Daniel stood up when he saw me. His smile faltered just slightly. Emma sat beside him, elegant and composed, and then there were her parents, Margaret and Thomas. Perfect posture, expensive watches, eyes trained to evaluate. Margaret looked me up and down. She smiled politely, but her eyes didn't smile. "Nice to meet you," she said, shaking my hand as lightly as possible. Thomas nodded. "Welcome." That was it. No warmth, no curiosity. I sat at the end of the table, the farthest seat. The first judgments. When the waiter handed me the menu, I hesitated. Margaret noticed. "Oh," she said softly, "do you need help choosing? The menu can be confusing." "Yes, please," I replied. "I don't eat out much." She leaned toward the waiter. "She'll have something simple." Something simple, as if food reflected intelligence. The conversation. They talked about their travels, their investments, their lifestyle. Every sentence carried a number. "This hotel costs $900 a night. Our wine collection is worth thousands. We recently upgraded our vacation home." They spoke at me, not to me. Eventually, Margaret turned her attention my way. "So, what do you do for work?" "I work in an office," I said quietly. "What kind of position?" "I help where needed." She nodded. "Administrative roles are respectable." Respectable, but small. "Do you live alone?" she asked. "Yes." "That must be difficult," she sighed, "especially financially." I smiled gently. "I manage." Daniel shifted in his chair. Emma stared at her plate. The comparison. Margaret leaned back, satisfied. "We've always made sure Emma had the best," she said proudly. "Top schools, travel, support." She looked at me. "And when Daniel married Emma, of course we helped." "How kind," I said. "We paid for part of their home and their honeymoon. A parent's duty, really." She paused. "And you? Were you able to help them?" I swallowed. Not much, just what I could. Margaret smiled. Well, every little bit counts. The knife slid in cleanly. The offer. After dessert, Margaret folded her napkin. She said, "There's something we wanted to discuss." Daniel straightened. "Mom," she raised her hand. "We adore Daniel, and we want the best for him." She looked at me with forced kindness. "At your age, living on a limited income, it can be a burden." A burden. "So, Xi'an, we thought perhaps we could help you." I waited. "A small monthly allowance to make life easier." "How small?" I asked calmly. "Well, $300 to start, maybe more later." "And in return?" I asked calmly. She smiled. "Just give Daniel and Emma space. Let them build their life without worry." There it was. They wanted to buy my absence. The silence. The table went quiet. Daniel looked horrified. Emma looked ashamed. Thomas watched closely. I took a sip of water. Then I smiled. "That's very thoughtful," I said. Margaret relaxed. "But may I ask something?" I continued. "Of course." "How much did you give them for the house?" "About $40,000, she said proudly. "And the honeymoon?" "Another $12,000. I nodded. "So $52,000 for them and $300 for me." She frowned. "It's different." "No," I said gently. "It's very clear." The reveal. I leaned forward. "Margaret, you've spent the entire evening measuring worth in dollars." She stiffened. "You assume I need your money." I met her eyes. "But let me tell you something you didn't ask." I paused. "I earn more in a month than you offered me for a year." The air froze. Daniel's eyes widened. Emma gasped. Thomas blinked. Margaret laughed nervously. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking," I said. "I earn over $40,000 a month. I've been a senior executive for 2 decades. I signed contracts larger than your investments." Silence. "I live simply because I choose to, not because I must." Margaret's face drained of color. The truth. I raised my son alone. I worked nights, studied weekends, missed sleep, not dignity. I didn't teach him to chase wealth. I taught him to respect people. I looked at Daniel. "I never told you because I wanted you to love me, not my bank account." Then I looked back at Margaret. "You offered me $300 to disappear." I stood. "But I don't disappear for money." The ending. I placed my napkin on the table. "I don't need your allowance. I don't need your approval." I smiled softly. "But you will remember this night." I turned to leave. Daniel followed me outside. "Mom," his voice broke. "I'm sorry." I hugged him. "This," I said quietly, "is why I stayed silent." True power doesn't announce itself. It waits.